Well, good morning, everyone. If this is your first time visiting with us this morning, as Andrew just introduced me, my name is Daryl, and the thing that you will want to know about me, I can tell you my job title, but that really won't mean much because you probably don't know what I do. I work with the kids, and so normally on Sundays, I am facilitating the kids' part of the worship. But today, I'm over here teaching all of you, and it is good to be here with you this morning. Last week, Pastor Richard started us off on this new series called Trust. And he really expounded on this idea of trusting God with today. And as part of his message, he quoted or read for us a verse from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3. And I think it's the first slide this morning. There it is. Oh, maybe not. It's up there somewhere. Anyway, that verse in the NIV, there it is. In the NIV says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And he went on to explain to us that the idea of trusting God means that we put our full weight on him. We believe that he is capable of impacting every area of our life. And as Christians, we believe that God is capable of impacting every area of our life. And we trust him to impact our life more when we experience his power. And so as we progress through this series over the next few weeks, our hope is that you might consider how you can trust God more in some difficult areas of your life. And so this week, my challenge and my hope is that all of you will consider how we are trusting God's power to protect our family. Recently, there's been a couple stories in the news. One is the 2019 college admissions bribery scandal, where several wealthy parents paid multi-millions of dollars to make sure that their kids got into the right school, despite the fact that they might not have had the SAT scores or the grades or whatever it took to honestly enter those institutions. And then the other one is a court case called People v. Turner from the year 2015, where a Stanford swimming athlete received a greatly reduced sentence in his case where he was found guilty of abusing another female student at a fraternity party. And in both of these cases, the thing that's familiar or that connects them is this idea that the families got involved in these and did some dishonest things to kind of protect their image, to try to make sure that the way the world viewed them or the way the world viewed their kids was not altered or changed by what happened. And so they were worried about their child's future, and as a result of that, both families committed some morally obtuse acts to protect their family and to hopefully, move their children into a position to encounter the best possible scenario. And one family didn't trust that their child could enter college and do so with integrity and on their own merit. And the other family didn't trust that the court system would carry out justice with integrity, so they took matters into their own hands and attempted to, in their own way, conceal the truth from the world. And so anyone paying attention during this news cycle can tell that this skeptical type of behavior, this idea where we have to insulate ourselves and we have to insulate our family and do everything we can to protect our family, even if we did some slightly dishonest things or a person in our family is worthy of consequences for their actions. And so it's becoming very commonplace that people are willing to do anything to protect their family. And the more I look at these stories, these family scandals we keep reading about, I'm inclined to think that while these are sad and the truth about them is not happy, they are a symptom of a much deeper problem. We have a trust problem. Now, the above examples are obviously extreme, but they do reveal something to us. As a society, we lack faith. And that lack of faith influences the way that we handle tough situations, especially when our family's involved, when our family needs protection. Our society has taught us that we simply cannot trust anyone but ourselves to protect our family and to have our family's best interest in mind. And therefore, we feel like it's up to us to control what happens to our family, and it's up to us to create this perception that the world has of us and our family. We're protecting ourselves. And so if the honest reality makes us look bad, then we have to manipulate the system to make it look right. We have to, again, protect. So we create our own dishonest reality because we believe it will solve problems and present the best version of our family to the world. And if we don't like what school our child is in because we don't want to hear maybe what a teacher has to say or somebody's opinion, then sometimes our response is to just change schools. If we don't like what a coach has to say about an athlete, we fire the coach and we find a new team to play for. We try to change or manipulate the situation to work to our advantage. And if we don't like what a doctor has to say, we find a new doctor who will tell us what we want to hear. The point is that sometimes in our effort to protect, we set aside morality, we sacrifice integrity, and we ignore the truth. And we put our faith in all the wrong places. A couple springs ago, I had the opportunity to coach what is the equivalent of Little League baseball. And on the first day of practice, I always have a meeting with the players and the parents, and I inform them both at the same time that the number one way to make sure that your kid doesn't play a certain position is to come up and ask the coach if they can play that position, right? Because I asked them, and here's why I asked them to trust me that I'm putting their kid in the best position to succeed. I'm playing their kid somewhere where he's going to be safe, where he's going to have the opportunity to have the most fun and make the biggest impact in the game. Now, if they question those things, then they can come and talk to me about it. And maybe we can find something to work that works for them. But I had this one mom who really wanted to see her son play first base. For some reason, she thought he was going to be really good at it. And he had potential, but he had one problem that was really keeping him from being able to play that position. He couldn't catch the ball. And so if you know anything about baseball and you know anything about what a first baseman does, the number one thing they do is catch the ball. And so I'm standing there and I'm talking to his mom at the beginning of the game, and she's had it. She's had enough. She wants to see him play first base. So against my better judgment, I changed the lineup and I put him at first base to start the game. On the very first pitch of the game, this kid smacks a line drive and our third baseman scoops it and makes a throw, and it's a perfect throw, and this kid does exactly what he's supposed to do. He stretches to the ball, he puts his glove out. The only problem is the ball sailed over the top of his glove and nailed him right on the nose. And so he's laying on the ground crying, the ball is rolling around, and the kid that was standing on first base is now standing on third base. And so I look out at his mom, and she kind of gives me one of these, and I walk out there, and I look at him, and I call him by his name, and I say, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah." And I say, "Do you want to finish the inning?" He says, "No, I need some ice." And so we bring him in and give him an ice pack for his nose. But the reality is that had his mom listened to me or trusted me as I asked her to in the very beginning, this little guy might not have gotten hurt. And so we oftentimes think that if we're protecting, we're trying to get our kid to the best possible place, or we're trying to protect an image, we sometimes can get ourselves in trouble. And so the tension that we're going to discuss today, the tension that's facing us today is not so much about what we do to protect our family as it is why we do what we do to protect our family. And so there's a difference between advocating for protection that's deserved and achieving protection, or what we would consider to be protection, through manipulation. And so please don't misunderstand. I'm saying that we have every right to advocate for ourselves and for our families in all situations. If your family is being exploited, you have to do everything you can to protect it. The problem is, as many of you already know, at some point in our efforts as we try to protect our families, we will almost certainly encounter a situation that we have absolutely no control over. And nothing we do is going to reestablish control over that situation. And there will be situations where we will be tempted to dishonestly manipulate and dishonestly attempt to achieve control in order to perceive or protect. And so there also will be situations where we can't do that. And there will be situations where we can't dishonestly alter what we are ultimately trying to protect, which is the world's perception of us and our family. And so if we know that's the case, if we're aware that eventually something's going to come up where we can't manipulate, we can't move out of it, we can't get out of it, why did we start believing that we were the only ones capable of protecting our family? Why do we trust dishonesty to manipulate difficult situations? Why do we have to use dishonest tactics to facilitate and create a public facade? Why are our family's perceptions more important than our family's integrity? Why do we stop trusting the power of transparency and truth? You see, for Christians, we even have to take that another step, and we have to ask ourselves, why did we stop trusting God with our families? Why did we let our faith and our trust in God stop influencing our decisions? When did we stop trusting in the power of God to protect our family? The Bible tells us that Jesus has a propensity for meeting people in the type of situations that we're talking about. The big ones that we can't control, the big ones that required the people involved to put their faith in something or someone other than themselves. And the Gospel of Mark tells us one story about a man named Jairus, who immediately upon Jesus' arrival to this small lakeside town of Capernaum, falls at Jesus' feet and begs Jesus to come to his house and to heal his daughter, who is very ill. And so Jairus, knowing full well who Jesus was and what involving him in his family business could do to his reputation, asked Jesus for help. And Jesus agrees to follow Jairus home and see what he can do for his daughter. This is a challenging situation, I'm sure, for Jairus because the text refers to him as the leader of the synagogue. If you don't know what the synagogue was, the synagogue is kind of like where we're at now. It was the kind of the more informal gathering place for worship. And so he was most likely some sort of Pharisee that had been charged with administrating this collected body of believers. And if you know anything about the Pharisees and Jesus, you probably know that they mix about as well as oil and water. Okay? They don't. The Pharisees believed something completely different and oftentimes accused Jesus of gaining his power that he used from the devil and not from God. And so for Jairus to go up and fall at this man's feet and sacrifice everything he had, this is a big step. This is important. This is something that we should pay attention to. And so Jesus agreed to follow Jairus home. And while they were on their way, a gathered crowd continued to follow them through the town. So Capernaum's a small town. It's got narrow streets, probably not very well kept, probably dirt roads. And this whole group, I picture it almost to be the size of the town itself. Everybody in the town is so excited that Jesus is there that they're gathering around him. And this mob is moving through the streets of Capernaum towards their religious leader's house. And Jesus and Jairus and all of Jesus' disciples are somewhere in the middle of all of this. Also in the crowd is a woman who is ill and has a disease that she has found to be incurable. She's gone to see doctors. She spent her entire life savings trying to fix it, and she just can't. And so in a last-ditch attempt to find healing, she tells herself, if I can just reach out and touch Jesus' cloak, then I'm going to find healing. And so that's what she does. She fights her way through the crowd. As Jesus is walking by, she reaches out, catches the end of his cloak, and the Bible says that immediately she was healed. Jesus also felt the power leave him. Jesus felt the miracle happen. And he immediately turned and said to the people around him, "Who touched me? Who touched me?" And keeping in mind that this is kind of a large crowd, Jesus' disciples kind of look at him and go, well, I think it's safe to say that everybody around here has probably touched you at some point because, this is pretty tight. We're kind of walking, kind of like sardines in a can. And so we don't understand why this is important. And Jesus said, no, somebody touched me. And so he looks at the crowd and again he says, who touched me? And despite all of her fear and all of her nervousness, the woman comes forward and says, I did. And Jesus looks at her and he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. And so Jesus takes time, he could have easily just kept walking, but he takes time to stop and to speak to this woman because he wants the people to hear what's happened. He wants people to understand the power that God has given him. He wants people to understand the power that God has to impact both their physical life and their spiritual life. But while this interaction is happening, some of Jairus' family members have met the crowd going the other way, and they inform Jairus that his daughter has died. And they even go as far as to tell him that he need not bother Jesus anymore because there's nothing he can do. Can you imagine what's running through his mind right now? That man did everything he could. He showed up. He heard Jesus was coming. He showed up. He made sure he was the first one there. He fell at Jesus' feet. He offered him everything he had. He begged and he begged to get Jesus to come to his house as a last-ditch attempt to save a daughter whom we can only assume he deeply loved. He sacrificed everything, his reputation, his job. And because Jesus has to stop and talk to this woman who has nothing to do with the situation, everything that he fought for is now lost, is gone. However, Jesus overhears this conversation. And he looks at Jairus and he says something very simple. Do not fear, only believe. Do not fear, only believe. For some reason, they continued on their way to Jairus' house. And as they arrive, Jesus notices that there is a procession of family members and professional mourners who have begun the grieving process for this little girl. And the first thing he does when he arrives is he says, get the heck out of here. She's not dead, she's asleep. And because we know that the news has already spread, we can only assume that these people are thinking that Jesus is crazy, and they start to laugh at him. And they say, well, no, somebody looked at her, she wasn't breathing, we're pretty sure she's dead. But Jesus says, you know what? Get out of here. And he clears the house so that the only people left there with him are Peter, James, and John, his 3 disciples, and the girl's parents. And they walk into the bedroom where the girl was resting and we assume died. And he grabs her hand and he says to her, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately she got up and began to walk. The people in the room were amazed, and it took everything they had just to respond to Jesus' simple command to give her something to eat. In both these instances, we see faith. What little faith there was produced enough power to perform amazing miracles. The woman forsook all she knew and all that she believed about herself for a chance to be healed forever. What happened with Jairus' family was nothing short of a miracle that only God could do. And it was a miracle that everyone around him and Jairus himself was programmed to believe couldn't happen. Dead people couldn't be resurrected. And they especially couldn't be resurrected by people who had been defiled and made unclean. So here's the reality of this situation from Jairus' eyes. And it might have contributed to why he got so upset initially. The minute that woman touched Jesus, the woman with the illness that she had suffered with her whole life that needed to be cleansed and was healed, according to their Jewish belief, she had made Jesus ceremonially unclean. He was no longer fit for ministry. He was no longer fit to worship. He was going to have to go through a cleansing process, an act of worship before he could supposedly do anything or tap into any of God's power. But Jesus also took it a step farther. And when he entered the house, he walked up and he made physical contact with a dead body, which does the same thing. It made him spiritually unclean. And so for all of these Jewish people standing there watching this happen, this has got to be, I think it explains why the text says that they were amazed, because everything that they had ever been taught, every belief that they'd ever had about God was changed in that moment. Because the girl was healed right before their eyes by somebody who was supposedly unable to do that. And so when it seemed like the odds were stacked against them, two people scraped together enough faith to experience the power of God and his ability to move mountains in their life. The woman's faith allowed her to experience the one thing she always wanted: life. Jairus' faith led him to believe that an impossible situation could be solved. But he knew that if he was wrong, it was going to cost him everything. Their faith in the power Jesus possessed altered their lives forever. Why can't we believe the same thing? Why can't you believe the same thing? The Old Testament passage that Andrew read for us this morning is called the Shema. And it's this phrase that gets repeated, and it's something that they would memorize and repeat to themselves to remind themselves of the responsibility that the parents had and that they had as believers in Yahweh. And so contained in the book of Deuteronomy was this short passage where it gave the command, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. But it also contained verses after that talk about how not only are you going to do this, but you're going to teach your children to do this. You're going to teach your family that this is important, that this is what you value, that this is how you live your life. From the very beginning, it has been God's plan to use families to impact our world. And that's exactly why he instructs us to teach our families about life with him. Valuing family is not a new thing. It's not this new psychology that Americans have adopted to make for a better life. The family is God's original plan for evangelism. And it's always been part of his plan to transform the world. Family units are simply how God intended us to live. So all of you are part of a family. And you will all experience something in your family that you can't control. Someone in your family could get sick and you won't know what to do. Someone in your family could get a divorce and you won't know how to help them. Someone in your family is going to make a mistake and you won't know how to relieve them of the consequences you fear that they are going to face. You will see the people closest to you, your family, get hurt or experience pain. And you will not be able to solve the problem for them or protect them. You, like Jairus, will have to make a choice. And that choice may ask you to sacrifice everything you have. That is the unfortunate reality of this life. You can't fix everything, no matter how bad you want to. You can't always protect your family. But there is one thing you can do. You can stop living in fear, and you can believe. You can believe that God will look out for your family. And you can trust that the path he leads you down will be full of hope and grace. When life seems to be too big and your family's circumstances begin to weigh heavy on you, trust your family to God. Believe that his love for you and your family is so great, and his ability to impact your family is so real, that when life gets too big, your response isn't to try to protect your family or your family's legacy. Believe that God is capable of taking even the worst family situation and turning it into something that will benefit your family for the long run and give you a reason to tell others all about the work that he has done in your life, the power that he has displayed in your life. Trust God with your family. Teach your family to trust him. If you do that, there won't be a thing that your family can't handle. What if we were a church where hurting families could come and experience hope? What if we were a church that taught people in our community that the pain they experience is real, but that there is still hope? What if we were able to help families understand that they don't need to protect themselves if they are willing to trust God with all that they have? What if families knew that this was a safe place where they could bring all their junk and that they would be met with grace and with love and with understanding? What if this was a place where people could come and experience the type of miracles that Jairus and his family experienced that day? What if we could introduce them to that opportunity? That's what it means to introduce somebody to the transforming power of Jesus Christ. It means showing them that they can not only trust God to transform their lives, but also transform their families as well. We have a calling to share the gospel, to teach people all about living the life that God has intended them to live. We, the church, are God's plan for the transformation of the world. And that means that we are God's plan for the transformation of families. And so are we ready to do what needs to be done? Are we ready to trust God with our families? Because if we are, then we might just see miracles start to happen. Pray with me. God, we love you. We offer this time up to you this morning. May it be pleasing to you. May it bring you all the glory. God, we offer ourselves up to you. We offer our families up to you. God, may you teach us to trust you. May you teach us to trust our families to you and help us to walk with you together. We believe that you are in our world, that you are moving and that you are changing, and that you are drawing people closer to yourself. Lord, give us the strength and the wisdom and the knowledge we need to join the team, to take part, and to allow your power to transform the world we live in. We love you. Amen.